We'll start this morning with the return of the House. Newly elected and returning members of Parliament descend on Ottawa this week. Monday, they'll elect a Speaker of the House of Commons. Then on Tuesday, King Charles III will deliver the government's speech from the throne, which will lay out this government's priorities and set up what will be a busy few weeks ahead of the summer break.
By Canada Day, our government intends to take action to eliminate all remaining federal barriers to internal trade. We promised a middle-class tax cut leading to over $800 of savings for two-income households. We're acting today on that so that by July 1st, as promised, that middle-class tax cut that will reduce taxes for the 22 million Canadians who pay federal income taxes, that tax cut will take into effect.
With me now is Government House Leader Steve MacKinnon. Hi, Minister. It's good to see you again. Thanks for making the time.
It's great to be with you.
What can Canadians expect from your government that will differentiate it from the last session?
Well, let's remember the last session. Paralysis, filibuster, long procedural debates. I think Canadians are fed up with that. They're demanding action. They're demanding results. And those are things that we intend to deliver for Canadians. We have, I think, a very focused set of priorities, but priorities nonetheless. We want to get work done, and we want to get results for Canadians. For example, income tax cut. Yes, every Canadian who pays income tax will get an income tax cut by July 1st. That's obviously something that I don't think many parties disagree with, but nonetheless needs to go through Parliament. We will be proposing that, and we'll be proposing other items. Again, a focused set of priorities. I don't think it'll surprise anyone. We talked extensively about these things during the election campaign, but we want to make sure Canadians know that we heard them loud and clear.
So a couple of things on what you have mentioned and whether that will jive with what does happen. The first, you mentioned the middle class tax cut that you promised during the campaign. The other thing that I've heard frequently from the Prime Minister is around bringing down internal trade barriers and introducing legislation to that effect before the start of the summer. Will both of those things happen from a legislative perspective?
We intend to act absolutely with respect to having one Canadian economy, not 13. We want to give Canadians the tools. Mr. Carney has said, you've heard him repeatedly, Vashi, say we can do more for ourselves than others can take away from us. And it's very much in that spirit that we'll be proposing some significant measures that will help us achieve a better functioning Canadian economy, more fluidity in the Canadian economy, more export opportunities so we can diversify our trade. These will be among the proposals we'll be making.
And that is from a legislative perspective. So just to be clear, is there anything, like, is that a piece of legislation that you will introduce?
Our platform talks very clearly about
it. Does say, that's why I'm asking. I know, but lots of times people propose things in a platform and it doesn't happen. So I've seen it, as have you.
I think you'll find Mr. Carney says what he means and means what he says.
Okay, so then beyond those two things, is there anything else legislatively that we can expect from your government?
Well, we have a big job to do, which is to approve the funding of the government. We have to approve all of the estimates for the government. That requires procedurally a lot of time, and we're going to be taking that time, making sure that Canadians see transparently how their money's spent.
A few weeks ago, the last time you were here, specifically with respect to the tax cut, I had asked whether it would be something very simple that opposition parties can look at and vote. And you know, you hadn't drafted what it would look like at that point. I imagine since it's coming ASAP, you have now. Is it going to be simple and just about that tax cut? Well,
let me just reiterate that there is absolutely no intention on our part to play any ambiguous games with that.
Put the opposition in the corner.
There's a lot of incentive for us, for Canadians, to know very specifically that they're going to be having an income tax cut coming July 1st, and those incentives will weigh heavily on the means by which we use to get this approved.
So to follow that, do you feel as though, or based on your conversations you've had so far, you have enough support from opposition parties to get that passed in as quickly as you're promising to?
I would be very surprised. I don't want to prejudge them. They can speak for themselves. I would be very surprised that any party is against an income tax cut for Canadians.
Do you plan to introduce legislation to repeal the consumer carbon tax?
Look, that will have to be done eventually. We want to remove, the carbon tax has been removed. It's at zero.
Well, it's been zeroed. It's not the same thing.
So, it's a latent piece of legislation. I don't know if you've seen the statutes of Canada. There are a lot of laws on the books that either aren't applied anymore or are simply ignored, maybe even forgotten. But the carbon tax is absolutely gone, and we'll make sure that that's made very clear to Canadians in due course.
Well, the reason why I ask about that is because, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, the criticism raised by the Conservatives when it was, zeroed, was that essentially leaving the possibility open for a time when we are not in a crisis, or when your government doesn't feel it is as unpopular as the new Prime Minister has deemed it to be, because you and your colleagues spent years, almost 6 years in fact, saying it was a very vital policy instrument. So there is no chance, you're saying, of that consumer carbon tax ever being resurrected under a Mark Carney government? Let
me be very clear. Mark Carney has been very clear. There is absolutely no intention to go back to a consumer carbon tax.
And when you say that in due course, you mean at one point you do plan to repeal that legislation?
Well, we will absolutely be making it very clear to Canadians that there is no plan to return to a carbon tax. None. Zero.
But what does that mean, other than you saying that?
Well, you'll understand that on a very serious level, it's important for me to not speculate about the contents of legislation before it's presented in the House. So, if and when that legislation were to be presented, I think that that Canadians would find a reassurance that the carbon tax no longer is part of the climate framework.
You're right that you wouldn't be able to disclose the contents, but you can, and your government has in the past signaled that you intend to introduce something legislatively to that effect. You're not being clear.
I think I've been pretty clear that the net effect for all consumers is there will be no carbon tax. We have no intention of returning to the carbon tax. It is not part of the climate change policy mix for this government.
On the sort of wider policy mix where energy and climate change is concerned, on Friday, the new energy minister was before a business audience in Calgary, delivering a message that was very pro-conventional energy. When I spoke with the Prime Minister a few weeks ago, he also, changed his campaign position, which was basically that he was going to stand by the emissions cap, stand by C-69, and said he was open to taking them off the table should that be necessary. Is that on any legislative agenda in the near future?
Well, I don't have a lot to add to that other than to say that I obviously followed very carefully the speech of my colleague, Mr. Hodgson, in Calgary. I think Canadians should look to that speech as they should to your interview with the Prime Minister, as a good guide to the government's thinking on these issues. Lots to play out over time. Someday may require legislation, someday may require policy direction, but I think the intention is clear, and I think what Canadians more generally, Vashi, can appreciate about this government and about this Prime Minister is we have made things clear. The mandate letters that came out this week they're a focused set of priorities. There are marching orders. They are marching orders for all ministers in this government. We have some fundamental things to do. Canadians have demanded some pretty fundamental change, a pivot to the economy, making sure our economy grows bigger, more productive, more fluid, making sure that we deal with the challenges presented by the United States, dealing with the housing challenges that our country faces, and addressing the fiscal challenges of the federal government. These are things that Mr. Carney has spoken about from day one of his leadership candidacy. These are consistent priorities. We think it's really good that Canadians have a clear sense of where this government's going, and I think it'll be very much captured in this very short legislative session.
Well, to be clear, why I'm asking about things like C-69, or the emissions cap is because you do have people in Alberta and Saskatchewan, you have economists saying that runs the existence of those runs counter to exactly the agenda regarding the economy that you just laid out. And when you say that the intention is perfectly clear, I think there are people who would say the Prime Minister saying one thing in the campaign and another thing later, and then the next day the former Environment Minister, now National Identity Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, coming out and saying there is no need for new pipelines, confuses Canadians as to where exactly your government will go. And I'm asking you, I know that you're not here to clear everything up for every minister, but you are the person who will introduce legislation in the House of Commons. Is there any intention to repeal any of those things from a legislative perspective?
What I think the intention of Mr. Carney is, and his interview with you, Mr. Hodgson's speech on Friday in Calgary, very much stand as the intentions of the government. That will manifest itself in many, many ways. Energy, renewable and conventional, is a very complex area, regulated heavily at the provincial level, regulated somewhat at the federal level. Mr. Carney is going to meet the premiers, I think very importantly and symbolically, in Saskatoon on June the 1st. These discussions are ongoing. What form any of these things take, I think will be very, very consistent with the themes and the intentions that the Prime Minister laid out for you.
Does that mean there will be something? I'm trying to read between the lines because I'm not getting it.
Well, again, I'm not going to speculate. What I'm going to do is let the Natural Resources Minister take a breath. He's given a very important speech. I'm going to let he and the Prime Minister work through the various things that add up to making real the vision that they've laid out. And my job as government House Leader is to support that work and make sure that it is considered and hopefully approved in the House of Commons. One
final procedural question for you. I've just got a few seconds. If in fact the marquee piece of legislation, I imagine in the tax cut, faces issues, is there any potential of the House being extended beyond the 3 weeks it is now on the calendar for?
I don't want to speculate about timing. We have a focused set of objectives. I don't think we've overloaded the agenda. There'll be lots of time for debate. There'll be lots of time to debate the throne speech. I think a lot of members will want to make maiden speeches. It's important. There's a lot of new members of the House of Commons, 70 in our caucus. Quite unprecedented, renewal in the Liberal caucus to have 70 new members. So we'll want to let people comment, obviously, on the government's priorities through the throne speech debate, and then we'll want to bring a very focused set of priorities to the House of Commons. We think there'll be lots of time to debate those things. There'll be opposition days as well.
Have you ruled out extending the sitting, though?
I'm not going to rule anything in or out.
Okay, and I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister, a pleasure as always. I appreciate your time.